This one is for the children. I have always wanted to make this kind of video because I feel like I started IB quite blindly, at least in terms of like practical matters or like knowing what to expect. So hopefully I will save at least one of you. As you can see by the title, I'm gonna be talking about stuff that I wish I knew before I started IB, or just like little important things that you might want to keep in mind. A disclaimer, of course, I went to a pretty good IB school. We had like well-trained teachers and IB was the only curriculum that we had, so like that was part of my experience. Yours may be different if you go to a school where IB is pretty new. I just want to say there's like a balloon back here, which is why it looks like there's something in the window. I'm gonna do like 7 tips because 7 for IB, like maximum grade. Yes. First and arguably most important point is that your grades at the beginning do not matter, like literally at all. It's really not something to worry about because I feel like I've seen so many cases of people starting off and getting like way lower grades than they're used to and getting discouraged by that, which you should really avoid. It really like doesn't affect anything apart from like maybe your report cards, but in terms of actual like predicted grades or college applications, or in terms of reflecting your final grade, like the beginning really does not matter, especially the first semester of DP1, like at all. So I would say it's really better to just like use that time to sort of like familiarize yourself with like how IB works, how your school works, how your teachers are, like how they grade, like testing out different study methods and just like trying new things. I feel like my camera keeps sliding down. Oh my god, this is like horrifying. So just consider it as more of like a trial period than any like actual serious part of IB, because the beginning is very unimportant. If your school is not great and or like experienced in terms of IB as well, like I'd also recommend like joining online communities on like IB related pages. So like Reddit and Discord are like huge places, which normally one might avoid both of those platforms at all costs, but in terms of IB communities, like those two are really the best, I would say. Like there's a lot of resources and like alumni or just like other students, so if you just need somewhere to like find extra resources or help, that could be a good option. Second, the amount you prepare over the summer does not matter like at all. I can say that at least for my subject, the way that it works is that like the pace at which you learn things in class is so fast that your self-study doesn't really matter, if that makes sense. So like for math, for instance, or even like biology, I spent like a few weeks revising the first few topics, so like 1.1, 1.2, and 1.3, and that took me like a solid while to get through, and yet in class you'll cover each of those in like practically one lesson, and I would say the same goes for many subjects. So it's really like you can prepare. Like for certain classes it might be helpful to like get acquainted with the syllabus, especially stuff like math, but it doesn't really matter, and I would say it's way better to spend that time relaxing and actually like enjoying your last proper break for the next 2 years, rather than like already getting in like a too overly academic mood. Obviously if you're interested and curious, like it can be great to read a little bit about the subject or like skim through a textbook. Another major tip I have is read the subject briefs online. So if you search up the name of your subject followed by like subject brief, then you can find basically it's kind of like a 1-page summary of the subject. Make sure it's the right like year because the syllabus changes every few years, but that will basically summarize all of the assessments, all of the units, topics for each subject. So that can be a good thing to read through if you don't want to read like the long subject guide that's like over 100 pages long. I have my notes here on the side if I keep looking sideways. I also would say that don't waste a lot of time finding resources. Like I wasted the most ridiculous amount of time finding like I made like a huge Google document of like IB resources that I collected for every single subject, and it's like I didn't end up using like over half of them. Not even over half, like 90% of them. It's more a matter of like obviously in the beginning it's nice to test out different things, but after a while you'll start to develop like your own favorite resources. So like, okay, like you prefer this textbook, or like you like these online resources, these YouTubers, those kinds of things. And so finding like hundreds is not really productive. Obviously little exploration can help, but just like don't go too overboard like I did. Main point being, like, don't stress if you did not prepare over the summer, because it doesn't matter. Third point is know that you're bound to struggle, and that being like 100% perfect with your time management is impossible. Like, I think often all of us have this feeling at the beginning of a new school year where it's like, this year I'm gonna be perfect with my time management and my study routine and study plan and everything, but like it never goes that way. And I think accepting that is also important, because the IB is hard. Like, there's a lot that's going on at all times. You sort of have to also keep in mind that things won't always go how you expect them to. At certain points, of course, like, you will hate a subject, you will hate a topic, even if you took extra care to choose subjects that you were passionate about. Like, it kind of happens to everyone. So just keep that in mind as you go in, that like it will be hard, like it will be a struggle, but it's really like you're not the only one that's struggling, which can be good to know. Fourth tip, make sure that you maintain like good connections or have like a good like support system. Like I said, like it will get quite emotionally exhilarating at times, especially in year 2. Like year 1 is honestly nothing really to worry about, but having good relationships with your teachers, your friends, your classmates can be important, really throughout the 2 years. So with teachers, obviously, like when it comes to practical matters like predicted grades and recommendation letters, it can really help to have teachers that are on your side. But also generally, like it can be good to just make sure that you're comfortable with them and that you feel okay going to them to ask for help and so on. Obviously, good friends to get through things. Counselor can also be helpful if you have a specific like guidance counselor or like university counselor. That can also be a good contact to have. If you want to find a tutor, that's also something that I highly recommend. If there's a subject that you kind of know that you might struggle with, it can be good to start that like early on so that you have like a consistent person for the entire 2 years. Next one is kind of random, but like this is something that I really regret, is not staying updated with like world events or like current affairs and reading the news often. This is something that comes up surprisingly a lot, at least like from my experience. I found that for things like for IA ideas, for instance, like getting inspired by current events is super helpful for a lot of subjects. For economics, if you're taking that, like your real world examples, like starting that early is a good habit. IA articles also for economics. For business management, like we used to have this like business concept essay that they, I think, have taken out for like all future years. But that was a thing where we had to research companies and stay updated on those. But even in general for business management, like reading news is super helpful. Also for language B, I found that like knowing certain issues that were going on in like the relevant countries, so I took Spanish like in Latin American countries, can help like build up your vocabulary as well, like by reading news articles in your second language. So things like that, just like making it a little habit to just like spend like 5-10 minutes a day to read the news can be super helpful for a lot of subjects. Next, I'd also say it's important to set clear priorities on what matters to you. Obviously like IB and just like high school is a very personal thing. It really can go however you want it to go, depending on what you prioritize. So you might prioritize your extracurriculars and doing things outside of school, especially if you're like applying to the US or that kind of system. You might prioritize having a good time, which is of course totally okay. You might prioritize academics a lot like I did, in which case obviously you're gonna be spending more time studying and revising. There's really not one set way to do it, so sort of thinking about your own goals and what you want to get out of IB is also really important. Of course, the sooner you do that, the better, so that you have a sort of plan in mind or like a purpose going into IB and you know exactly what your goals are. Lastly, most important one is it's all about balance. Like everyone always says, it's true, but it's really important to not neglect other aspects of your life for school, because IB is very like consuming in that way. Like just the sheer amount of things there are to always be doing makes it so that it kind of does take up a lot of time. But of course, make sure that you still have, you know, hobbies, free time interests, playing a sport or an instrument maybe, social life, family time, things like that is also really important. And of course, you do need to prioritize based on the situation. Like deep into IA season in DP2, like you will have to make some sacrifices, but it ultimately depends on you, what you're willing to do. If you want to score really well, then it is a huge commitment and a lot of sacrifices, but remember that there is so much more to it than just grades. That was all. Quick summary of just like the main points or like key takeaways, I guess. So your grades at the start are not as important as you think they are. Take it as a learning experience, as they say, but don't fixate too much on the final number. Summer studying, it's totally okay if you haven't done any. If you've done a little, that's good too, but don't worry too much about it. Understand that you are going to struggle and it will be hard, and that's okay. It's very much I would say like quite a natural progression, so it won't like be immensely difficult right away, but over time as things build up, it's sort of like, I think they have structured it in a way that makes sense, so you won't be too busy, at least in the beginning. Make sure to maintain good connections and friendships, read the news and stay updated on what's going on in the world, set your own clear priorities and goals based on what you want to get out of it, and lastly, make sure to find a balance. That's all I can think of, really. IB is quite a journey, I have to say. Now being done with it, I am so grateful. I really just wake up every day and I'm so glad that I no longer have to serve the International Baccalaureate. But for those of you going into it, it is hard. But it's really only as hard as you make it for yourself. Like if you really put in the daily time and effort to study a little bit, and if you stay focused in class and try different study methods and ask for help when you need it, like all of the little things really do add up. So just keep that in mind going into it. It's really not as scary as you think, and at least in the beginning, like it's really okay. Like it's pretty exciting to start a brand new curriculum, like kind of like official high school, I guess. I actually originally started my channel wanting to make like study related videos, or like especially IB videos. Like I would have started an IB channel during IB, but I was too busy doing the IB. So I'm hoping to make more of these kinds of videos in the future, depending on like how well they do, and also depending on if I have any ideas on what else to talk about. But yes, if you have any questions, then comment them down below. I feel like such a YouTuber. But yes, that is all for today.